In today's video, I will be going in depth to uncover who has been winning the fight so far between Gojo and Sukuna. Not sure if this video will be out after 231 is officially released, so if you guys are watching this and you haven't read chapter 231 yet, then this is your spoiler warning. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you guys have any suggestions, make sure to let me know in the comments. And enough chatting, let's get to it. First of all, Sukuna is at full power. The mummy that Sukuna ate is stated to compensate for the missing finger. Bringing up the finger for strength is not relevant since the mummy already filled in what was missing. His forearm form isn't relevant either because Sukuna hasn't noted it to be something that he's missing or needs. And this is really important because Gege is very specific with factors affecting the fight. In chapter 224, there was some initial hand-to-hand combat. Sukuna was using domain amplification to negate Gojo's infinity, yet fails to land one clean hit. Meanwhile, Gojo for most of this chapter had Sukuna retreating, or you can also say he was pressing him, and Sukuna had his back against the wall. Sukuna can't use any curse techniques while using domain amplification, and he was still holding his own against Gojo. That shouldn't be a relevant factor though, since in this chapter, Gojo didn't use a technique aside from his telekinesis. Neither of them were above each other in this chapter, but I do think that it's pretty apparent that Gojo was pressing Sukuna more than Sukuna was to Gojo. Angel notes in chapter 225 that the requirements for Sukuna to beat Gojo is to defeat the limitless curse technique, which later on we'll see Sukuna attempt to do this, but this is important to keep in mind since the other implication of this statement is that as long as Gojo has limitless, Sukuna cannot beat him. Hajime says that if it weren't for the godlike efficiency the Six Eyes gives you in manipulating curse energy, Sukuna would be better than him in curse energy efficiency. This is just more evidence that Gojo is above Sukuna. Gojo is always gonna have better curse energy manipulation than Sukuna. In the domain clash, Gojo and Sukuna were even. The only thing that would settle this battle is if they inflict significant damage onto each other, which wouldn't allow one of them to maintain their domain, leading to the guaranteed hit impacting instantly. It was an even match inside the barrier, but once Sukuna expanded his domain outside of Gojo's, he hit the domain from the outside, which is the weak part of a domain, and he had beaten Gojo in their first domain clash. Gojo seemed to have not known this, even though Choso had, so I think that was a little weird part in the fight, but it's whatever. Despite nerfs you get post-domain, Gojo was still able to outlive and survive Malevolent Shrine at its full power. While Gojo's getting slashed, he's simultaneously using reverse curse technique and simple domain and fighting Sukuna, who has a domain buff. With all this happening, he still has Sukuna on the ropes. It's important to note the emphasis put on the strain of using reverse curse technique, which impresses Sukuna and worries the students. Gojo speeds up, mantles Sukuna, and before Sukuna could take action, Gojo blitzes Sukuna with a red, tearing off part of his face. In the second domain clash, Sukuna hand-to-hand could not land a hit on Gojo, but Gojo did. Even though Sukuna rolled it off to touch Gojo to survive Unlimited Void, nonetheless, he still got hit and it wasn't something intentional. If he could have avoided getting hit, he would have. That statement also implies Sukuna by himself would die to Unlimited Void. We know he could counter with Maharaga, but a normal full power Sukuna would not be able to survive. Our normal Sukuna without 10 shadows can't survive Gojo's domain, yet Gojo has survived Sukuna's domain twice with ease. Sukuna broke Gojo's domain for a second time. Then Gojo uses Fallen Blossom Emotion to nullify Sukuna's cuts. This is the second time Gojo used the domain, and despite the drawbacks, he still very easily overcame Sukuna's domain. Even with all that, Gojo summoned domain once again and condensed the space of the barrier. Gojo and Sukuna's domain bursted open, but only one came out injured, that being Sukuna, which is something Sukuna never did to Gojo. He was never able to touch Gojo at all. Gojo, on the other hand, was at a disadvantage, yet never got hit by Sukuna outside of the domain cuts. And that's just another instance of Gojo being very clearly superior to Sukuna. In 229, there's once again another domain battle, and Gojo is just pressing Sukuna really badly and injures him again. Sukuna not being able to do anything against Gojo. At this time though, Sukuna is only using techniques granted by the domain. I know people are gonna say he's holding back. He's not really holding back. He's just being strategic. It's not that he's holding back his power, and even if you want to interpret it like that, he'd be holding back his technique not his physicals, which is what Gojo overwhelms him with. In chapter 230, Sukuna starts to heal his curse technique with reverse curse technique, which he probably learned from Gojo, or at least that's what the students seem to be questioning. Since Gojo had beaten up Sukuna, he could not keep up with Gojo anymore, which led to Gojo having a time advantage in domain deployment, and ultimately led to Unlimited Void hitting Sukuna, absolutely obliterating him and destroying Malevolent Shrine at the same time. Sukuna is visibly messed up by Unlimited Void, and Gojo rushes him to finish the fight. But Sukuna's able to pull out Maharaga by using Megami as a sponge for Unlimited Void. Sukuna still took damage from Unlimited Void, enough to prevent him from using another domain. At the end of the chapter, they're left with just using their physicals, and Gojo lands a big hit on Sukuna. In chapter 231, there's not much, but when it came down to it, once again, like Gojo has been the whole fight, he's dominating physically, grabbing Sukuna by the neck, dragging him across the floor and throwing him. Then they just talk about how much longer or what are the requirements for Sukuna adapting to Unlimited Void, and they reveal he needs 3 more spins on Maharaga's wheel for him to adapt. Gojo says he'll kill him before he can adapt, and Sukuna says that's when he'd finally be able to beat Gojo. Throughout this whole fight, Gojo has been at disadvantage so many times, yet he's been able to prevail over Sukuna, and that's why I think this fight hasn't been close so far. At this point, it's pretty obvious Sukuna would have died normally without 10 shadows since chapter 230. The only thing that saved him was Maharaga. Sukuna had all the right things in motion to easily defeat Gojo, especially within the first domain clash, and yet he hasn't been able to capitalize at all because Gojo has just been superior so far. Even when Gojo seems to be deep in mud, he's able to pull himself out and come out even better than before. In conclusion, I think Gojo has proven that he is superior to Sukuna thus far. Now, this fight isn't over yet, and we finally reached a point where it seems like we're reaching the conclusion. Anything can happen. I don't disregard the possibility of Gojo losing this fight, but the reason I'm saying this is because this video is just talking about who's been winning thus far, not who is going to win. Gege is too unpredictable for me to make any claims on that. Regardless of what happens, if you're a Gojo fan or a Sukuna fan, it's going to be good. Gege is a great author, and I'm sure the conclusion of this fight will break the internet, and us Jujutsu Kaisen fans will be eating good for a while. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, make sure to let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.